Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
The only other option really looking at CBTC interoperability today. So if it's really something that you want to procure today and you don't have 25 years to follow in the footsteps of what New York did 25 years ago, is to go for a Chinese solution, because China has developed an interoperable set of CBTC standards. So CBTC standards which are aligned with the normal mainstream CBTC standards, IEEE 1474 and so on, but with the explicit aim to specify interfaces in a way that allows for interoperability. And they have proven interoperability in the field, in practice, in a couple of places. In Beijing, they did a first trial, I think, with 3 suppliers. And then in Chongqing, I think they have 3 or 4 or 5 suppliers. I had a presentation about that on my CBTC conference last year, the virtual conference that I did, which is, by the way, still available. So it's great value for money. The intriguing thing is, because you may ask, well, what about the Western suppliers? Because normally you would choose between the likes of Alstom, Siemens, Hitachi. Those are the big 3 really, and all the other CBTC suppliers over time have been sucked into one of these 3 companies. Yeah, so Siemens, for example, gobbled up the previous Siemens France or Matra as it was, and they have a CBTC product. Then they have a CBTC product made in Germany, and then they also swallowed Invensys, which also had their own CBTC product. So they have at least 3 different CBTC products in their portfolio. If you look at Alstom, they got GE Transportation. They had a CBTC product, but that was buried. It never saw the light of day, which was a bit of a pity. And later they acquired Bombardier, which also have their own CBTC product. So Alstom has at least 2 different products in their portfolio. And Hitachi, they have an own CBTC, a Japanese development. Then they got Ansaldo with an own CBTC product. So that's 2. And now they are in the process of acquiring Thales as well, which also have their own CBTC product. So they have also 3 different CBTC products. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to 3 major suppliers globally with CBTC products. Now, the question is, how does that fit together, or how do they fit together with those Chinese interoperable CBTC standards? And what I find interesting and potentially promising is that all those suppliers are active in the Chinese market for CBTC. So they all have done projects in China. I mean, that's old style. That was before the interoperable standards were written. But they all have still offices in China together with Chinese joint venture partners. So they definitely have access to the Chinese CBTC standards, including engineers who can read Mandarin, who understand those standards. And if they want to play in the Chinese market in the future, chances are that they will have to have a variety of their CBTC product that is compliant with the Chinese standards and probably also interoperable as well. So I think that's an avenue that could be much closer to a global solution for CBTC interoperability than waiting for IEEE to change their standards for interoperability, and then you still have nobody that is forcing the suppliers to change their existing products to comply with those new standards, because the IEEE standards are non-mandatory anyway. Nobody there to enforce them. So, and I don't really think that a new customer to Metro like Tel Aviv would want to find themselves in a situation where they are responsible for forcing global suppliers into an interoperable solution. I don't really think they want that.
Question for you, Frank. Obviously, the Chinese market is huge. I mean, humongous. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension. The amount of lines that are going in, GOA4 and everything else in China, phenomenal. Take your hat off to them. Whatever the politics, wow. I mean, what a development in the last 20 years we've seen in the railway world in China. Technology is a bit iffy, maybe 10 years ago, but if it's good enough to run in Beijing, these sort of things, do you believe, first of all, the technology is mature enough? I mean, that's an open question. Secondly, my involvement with some Chinese suppliers during the last 10, 15, 20 years around the world, the biggest buggeration factor is the communication. And hey, I don't speak Chinese, so I'm not criticizing, but reality is I found, even in my last project in Abu Dhabi, Chinese supplier there, track guys, only one or two spoke English adequately. How much of a barrier do you think that is, and how good do you think the technology is now in China?
I personally think, and that's a personal choice, and I'm very transparent there, and this is not to push the Chinese industry into the world. I tend to compare the situation in the signaling market with what happened previously in the telecommunications market for railways and in the rolling stock market as well. So I think the Chinese signaling market at the moment is roughly where Huawei was in the telecoms market about 15 years ago. I remember when for the first time there was a rumor about GSMR coming from China with Huawei as the manufacturer. And everybody was laughing and nobody took them seriously. And then suddenly they got a project for GSMR in Germany of all places, and people stopped laughing. Yeah. So language problems that you had with Huawei back in 2008, you would not identify anymore in any shape or form in 2024. They're gone. They're completely gone because they have operated in the Western world long enough to hire people with proper English, maybe even local people that just work for them. So for them, I don't think the language barrier is there anymore. Rolling stock, similar example, CRRC, the biggest rolling stock supplier in the world for trains, active in the world market. We just got trains for them, suburban trains for them in Melbourne. Same story. I don't really think, and they're selling trains to Europe as well. So I don't really think anybody can still say, we can't use them because of language problems. Signaling, I'm not so sure. I mean, certainly the language barrier will become smaller over time. In the same way, it became smaller all the way to non-existing for Huawei in the telecom space. But in the year 2024, I could imagine it's still a problem there in the eyes of the client. Again, I'm not the decision maker anyway. It's really a matter how the client organization in Tel Aviv and the supporting engineers, like the likes of you, can get along with them. And the only way to find out is to check it out, to talk to them. Yeah. So normally a tender process is like a beauty parade where everybody tries to put their best foot forward. Yeah. If you find you have massive language problems to the point of complete cross communication in the tender process, there is a massive risk that it will become even worse during delivery when you get exposed to the engineers, which normally focus more on the technical details rather than on language and being understood in a non-Chinese language. So that's my personal thing, but I would think you've got to come up with your own opinion. Yeah, I would not say it doesn't work. I would not say it won't be a problem. It might be a problem, but whether it is one remains to be seen. Technology-wise, I think the risk is really minimal. And that's very, very easy to basically establish by going to China, looking at reference projects and just see how it runs. I mean, you can certainly in reference projects, you can put a lot of wool over a client's eyes by having only the biggest promoters and champions, and nobody in China will talk bad about Chinese CBTC suppliers. Nobody.
Of course.
But you just use the metro. You just go through the network. You look at the connectivities, at the timetable, at the real-time passenger information system. And if you can basically watch an operation like Beijing Metro run for an entire day without any disruptions, the technology must have something to achieve that. Absolutely. Yeah, there were times in China, I would say about 20 years back. I'm not quite sure when that changed. It probably changed more recently. So even 10 years back, there was a very strong trend in China to import CBTC from the Western suppliers, from the mainstream suppliers. So every CBTC in China until about 2010, 12 was Siemens, Invensys, Ansaldo, Thales, who did I forget? Alstom, of course. So every Western supplier was, Hitachi was there, Nippon Signal was there with CBTC. But they all came from outside China, because at that time, I think there was not enough trust in the capability of the Chinese signaling industry, and the risk of messing up the operations in cities like Beijing or other mega cities was just too big. But that has changed. You now have Chinese CBTC made in China by Chinese suppliers everywhere. You've got it in Beijing, you've got it in Shanghai, you've got it in Guangzhou, you've got it all over the place. So the reference list of Chinese CBTC suppliers have become very impressive over a very short period of time. But of course, it's all in China. Yeah. The export business for Chinese CBTC is almost non-existing to date, but that may change at any point in time. And I already see first indications here in Australia where it's about to start changing, that Chinese suppliers at least have a crack at the market and basically put their toe in the water and see what happens. Yeah, as you do when you start with export business.
I remember back in Bangkok on the MRTA, we hosted Chinese guys coming over to look at the Siemens installation there, GOA2, but nonetheless, Chinese guys came over. And I said to my boss, Martin Boda, that was the name of the guy, Martin Boda. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
I said to Martin, why are we doing this? You know they're going to steal our technology. Yeah, forgive me, this is a bit political. And Martin came back and said, we might as well sell it whilst we can, Bill. But the interesting, they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, what happens often? I mean, obviously the risk of I think technology transfer was the official term, at least when I worked briefly in China. And it was always a requirement for every project. It's not just that Western suppliers were forced to work in minorities with Chinese joint venture partners. So it was always 51% for the Chinese party and 49% for the Western party. So it was clear who was in control. But I think that suppliers probably have found ways to reduce the impact, reduce the consequence of that technology transfer. So, for example, I know at least one big supplier, they have a specific version of their CBTC specifically for the Chinese market. And one reason might be to basically have a sideline where any technology transfer does not directly impact the main roadmap for the global business. So it's kind of a protection. Maybe it's not the very latest version. Maybe it doesn't have all the bells and whistles in there. But that's what I meant earlier when I said that all the Western suppliers should have a variety of their CBTC product, which is meant to be used in the Chinese market. And if they want to continue using that in the future, with the existence of Chinese standards, which prescribe interoperability, there's a fair chance that the pressure for those Western suppliers to adopt the interoperable standards becomes higher and higher and higher. Yeah.
I think also
the other alternatives would be that interoperable CBTC only is ever done with Chinese suppliers, and the Western suppliers or the joint ventures with Western suppliers are basically left out and are only used if interoperability is not needed, which you always have if you have a network with segregated lines, where the lines are connected with interchanges, but you don't have trains traveling from one line onto the other. And then you can have one CBTC supplier here, another one there, and there's no need for interoperability. And this is what Sydney does. This is what Singapore did or has done. And that works quite well as well. And that's basically what I would see as the most likely solution for Tel Aviv. Indeed. For the 3 lines. Yes, there will be a lock-in with one supplier for one line, but they can basically have a choice between suppliers during the tender stage. They can choose different suppliers for different lines. But once that choice is made, you can't really say, this project, which is now 75% complete, has a problem with the remaining 25. We're just changing CBTC supplier. That doesn't work. And you know that they would have to rip out everything that's already installed. There would be an enormous sunk cost. And then any new supplier would have to start from scratch. So the very minimum is you would lose 75% of your time for delivery, and you would have this as a delay going to the end of the project. So,
yeah, that was one of my questions to the client: is how much interoperability really is there? How much traffic really is there going to be? What's it for? Because we've only got single cords joining the main lines. First thing, metro. What's the definition of a metro? Do we want interoperability for a metro? Why? Because there's no real through passenger services. It's a real metro, point A to point B.
Yeah.
First question, it's for yellow plant. Well, doesn't yellow plant operate in engineering hours? Our headway, designed at 90 seconds, may be operating at 120 or so. Are you really going to throw a yellow plant machine through there during the operational time? I don't think so.
That's the thing, yeah.
Do we really want to go down that road for the cost? The CapEx versus the OpEx. We just got to look at it. And the customer, I love them to bits. They're asking the right questions. They're asking the right questions. They're not closed-minded. What do you think? Go out, have a look. They're very, very receptive. And in fact, it's one of the client requirements is innovation. Great. It's so refreshing to work with people that are asking these hard questions or direct questions, Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's an example. What I would recommend you do is you go to a metro, for example, Singapore, because I'm a huge fan of Singapore Metro, how they set up the entire network. The operation is second to none. And Singapore from the start has had a network design with segregated lines. They have only one example where 2 lines are connected, but they have the same CBTC supplier for both lines together. So that also solves any interoperability problem. For all other lines, they are segregated from the rest of the network. They only have interchanges where you can basically have passenger exchange from one line to the other, but the railway tracks itself, they don't merge. There are no junctions, no nothing between lines. So talking to them what the consequences are for yellow machinery will be an eye-opener, I think. because they probably don't even understand the problem. They basically said, well, from the start, it was clear that every line would have a captive set of trains and would have a captive set of yellow machinery for maintenance stuff, maintenance vehicles. And every line has a separate control center and a separate train depot and a separate fully comprehensive maintenance facilities for trains and so on. And then that's just the way it is. Does that have an additional cost as opposed to, we can share the yellow fleet between all three lines? Yes, there's an additional cost. You need more yellow machinery. But on the other hand, what's your cost of creating or forcing an interoperable CBTC solution for your network? The cost of that and the risk of delays, budget overruns, all the unforeseeable things, I personally believe is way higher.
Yeah, indeed.
Way higher. And we give you a story, and people don't see that if they just look isolated at the procurement cost of yellow machinery. That stuff is expensive. Yes, it is expensive. And it's a definite cost. So if you segregate the lines, you know that you must have yellow machinery for each line separately. So that's a known cost that can be calculated down to the last dollar or whatever the currency is in Israel. Whereas on the other hand, the additional cost that you may have to force an interoperable CBTC solution, that's much less clear. There are many maybes in the future, and the cost will not come on day one. It will probably only come down the line. And by then the procurement officer has left the office and is no longer working there and so on. So they had a saving at the outset, and the catastrophe later on they're missing because they are already promoted somewhere else. So I give you an example that I had, which is very similar. Network setup is that you have two parts of the network. You can basically almost divide the network into two parts. Those two parts of the network are connected with one set of crossovers. So if you took out just 4-point machines, two on each line, the two networks would be physically separated.
Right.
They don't want to do that for what they call operational flexibility and so on. So therefore, we decided to go for a single supplier CBTC strategy. So that's fine. But then the next thing you need to think about is, how do you roll it out? On which line? If you have one supplier, they can't do 3 lines at the same time. They don't have the horsepower. So you need to decide which line are we doing first, which line do we do second, which line do we do third. That's by the way, circling back to Tel Aviv quickly, that's another consideration there. If you want to build 3 lines at the same time, you don't want one supplier.
Indeed.
Because they don't have the capacity to do 3 lines at once.
The clients already...
But having said that, by the way, if you look at Doha, which is not too far away from where you are, they did 5 lines with one supplier. Maybe worth a phone call that, how on earth did you do that? What were the problems? How did the supplier bring enough resources in to manage this? We want to do 3 lines with a single supplier. Would that work, or is that a huge risk in terms of the supplier being overwhelmed or overloaded or whatever? There was one scenario where we started with the most modern line with the rollout and do CBTC first on the north-south line. But then some people said, well, we need to keep a backup conventional signaling system. I said, well, what for? Well, we have 2 depots. We have one depot on the heritage lines and we have one depot on the north-south line. And we still need to run trains from the heritage lines over to the depot on the north-south line. I said, why is this? Because certain maintenance activities can only be done at one depot. So that means not both depots have the same setup. There was only one relays And that relays was on the more modern depot on the north-south line. So whenever a train from the heritage network needed the wheels laced, they need to go all the way up the north-south line to the other depot and then all the way back down. And if they're not fitted with CBTC, then you have mixed traffic between fitted and unfitted trains. So then I asked the question, at the time I was the project manager for the CBTC rollout planning. I asked the question is, how much is a wheel lace? Oh, Frank, it's expensive. I said, well, what's expensive? It's $2 million. And I smiled at them and said, well, what would you think if I give you a new wheel lace for your second depot? Oh, would you do that? Oh, that would be like Christmas and Easter on the same day or so. $2 million is a lot of money for a wheel lace. But $2 million compared to budget and schedule overruns for a $1 billion rollout.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think again, really. It suddenly, the relations get shifted very, very quickly. And all of a sudden, 2 million for a new wheel lace becomes a risk mitigation measure for your big project, for your CBTC rollout. And all of a sudden, you can get rid of this problem for $2 million any day of the week and twice on a Sunday. Really. Yeah. So this is what you need to look at. And it may actually turn out that buying a little bit more yellow machinery may be a cheaper solution to your problem compared to interconnectivity between the lines. Because once you have the connection there, people want to use it. And then you say, well, I don't really need a maintenance depot for the trains on each of the 3 lines, because I can get trains from over there to the depot over there for certain maintenance activities and trains from over there for other maintenance activities. So then you basically start cutting short on the fitment of your depots. And suddenly you get cross traffic of passenger trains, not in passenger service, just for the purpose of maintenance. And only because you didn't fit your depots properly. Again, you go to Singapore, every line has a separate depot, which is fully fitted. Everything they ever need for their train maintenance will be in the depot. The same on the other line. And then ask them the question, isn't that a waste? And just listen what they say. Why they think this is the most cost-efficient way to go about it.
Indeed. We've already had the conversations with our colleagues on another line, M2. There's the client in their wisdom is saying, hey, talk amongst yourselves, line manager, techie people. So we're already having these sort of conversations. And it's really great to hear from your experience, Frank. So thank you. Yeah.
Hi, it's Doc Frank again. What can I say? Even the best CBTC training in the world arguably can get even better. And that's what's happened with the brand new 2024 Understanding CBTC Fundamentals training. This is an upgrade from the previous CBTC Kickstarter training that exists since 2014 and has been continuously refined, improved, and updated. You have a massive 30 video lessons that you can watch on demand as long as you live. You've got lifelong access. You can build a certifiable CBTC competency, and the certification is offered by me as well as an additional option. You do not need prior signaling knowledge for this training. Just imagine that you can learn the fundamentals of CBTC without needing to know anything about railway signaling before the training. So that really makes it suitable for anybody working in the railway industry and for anybody being interested in working in the railway industry. The training is topped up by an industry-leading Q&A support over at least 12 months. You can sign up for this fantastic training under docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com www.podia.com/CBTC. And if you needed one additional argument, this course is actually cheaper than last year's training. So that's my way of helping you fighting inflation. Hope you enjoy, and I hope to see you at this CBTC training.
What you should definitely do, where you don't necessarily need me for, is asking the question, if you connect the three lines, what's the solution for CBTC interoperability? How do you want to do that? And then basically see what they come up with, what the ideas are, and then reflect those ideas against what else is happening in the world market. So if somebody says, yeah, we already made up our mind, we're going with the Chinese technology, and they have like 3, 4, 5 different suppliers that can all provide interoperable CBTC, and we can travel to Chongqing, we can watch it all there working in practice. That's our chosen solution. Then I would say, fine, technically, that will probably work. Whether it works with regards to communication problems, language barriers, I don't know. It's not up to me to tell. That's something that you need to look at for yourself. But technically, that would work. If somebody were to say, oh, well, I've seen interoperable CBTC in New York, that's what we want to do in Tel Aviv, I would say, oh, wait a minute. That may be not such a good idea, unless you've got as long as it takes to deliver your projects, which I don't think you have.
No.
Because you want to run trains. You want to run trains, and you don't want non-interoperable CBTC or problems with delivering interoperable CBTC to hold things up. You don't want that.
No, I think New York is definitely a big no-no, for the reasons you've already said. And I did read the articles. I thought they were very good. If we may move on, Frank, if I may touch upon another subject, I don't know how well aware you are, but I'd be interested in your opinion, if you don't mind. I understand something's going on in Paris. Maybe interoperability, maybe not real interoperability. What do they do? What are they up to?
Paris was one, when I did the research for this interoperability article, which is really recommended reading to anyone. It's in the IRSE news, and anyone who's an IRSE member like you are, for example, and most people in the railway industry are, they will have access through the archives to that article. So that's public domain, basically. When I did the research for that, New York and Paris were 2 examples which I included in the research to see what have they done and to what extent could that be a global solution for CBTC interoperability. And what I found in Paris was an interesting interpretation of the word interchangeability.
Interchangeability.
Paris doesn't call it interoperability. They call it interchangeability. Mm-hmm. Now, I had a certain definition of the word interchangeability, and in my understanding, that was even one step better than interoperability. Because interchangeability means you can basically take out one subsystem and plug another ones in, or maybe even down to component level. Like I take out the driver interface from one supplier, plug in another driver machine interface from another supplier, and it will work with the onboard computer from the first supplier. So that to me was interchangeability. Mm-hmm. So, and I thought, wrongly as it turned out, that when somebody has interchangeability, they will automatically have interoperability included. Turned out I was wrong. So I spoke to the guys in Paris. I got in touch with RATP, which is the metro operator in Paris. And I asked them about what they actually mean by interchangeability and to what extent that's the same or better even than interoperability. And what they said was interesting. They said, no, what we wanted to have, our main driver was flexibility in the procurement process. So we have basically broken down CBTC in its main 4 subsystems, which is supervision. That's the traffic management on top. Then you have wayside CBTC, you have onboard CBTC on the train, and then you have telecommunications
Right.
in between those things.
Yep.
And what Paris has done, they have defined, and then there are a few peripherals, for example, interlocking, passenger information system, platform screen doors, stuff like that. So they basically came up with a wider system architecture. They identified the key interfaces between those subsystems and peripherals, and then they standardized those interfaces.
Right.
And then they picked three CBTC suppliers to develop their products according to those interfaces. The outcome is that they say, okay, we want to fit CBTC on a certain line on the Paris metro network, which is a standalone line end to end.
Mhm.
So they go for an open tender where they say, okay, well, we have three suppliers that can give us the supervision system. We pick supplier A. We have three suppliers that can give us the wayside system. We pick supplier B. The onboard system comes from supplier C, and the telecom, let's throw the dice, supplier A. So for that one line, supplier A delivers supervision telecoms, supplier B delivers the wayside, supplier C delivers the onboard. But all the onboard on the entire line, all the trains running there comes from a single supplier's onboard system. All the wayside is a single supplier. All the supervision, single supplier.
Mhm.
And within that one line, because the equipment is the same everywhere, they said we don't have the need for interoperability. That's important to understand. Interoperability means if trains travel from one territory into another one with different wayside infrastructure, that is interoperability.
Indeed.
So they say we have the same infrastructure on the entire line. So the trains travel on the exact same infrastructure, on the same CBTC wayside on their entire journey. That's not interoperability. We don't need that. And what RATP also told me is that in order for them to achieve interoperability, additional work would be needed for the transitions between different territories with different wayside equipment. And they said, we haven't done it. And two, we don't intend to do it because we have standalone lines. We don't have the need for interoperability. So that's the Paris solution. But again, the question would be, to what extent would that be transferable to Tel Aviv, for example? So if somebody said, we want to go, I heard about the Paris solution, let's take it to Tel Aviv. So number one, you've got three suppliers for Paris. You would need to take the same three suppliers. So again, you are kind of locked in, but you are not locked into a single supplier. You are locked into a subset of suppliers.
But you are locked in at the subsystem level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
anyway, and from a delivery perspective, there will be a lock in anyway. You can't, if you have any supplier, you can pick any supplier you want. I just pick Alstom for argument's sake because it starts with an A. Yeah. So if you give Alstom a contract to deliver CBTC on a line, chances are they will do okay because they are a good supplier, as all the others are as well. But let's just say, for argument's sake, there are any issues with the rollout, and 3/4 in your project delivery, you realize it doesn't really work very well. At that point, you cannot change CBTC suppliers.
yeah.
Because what would happen? Let's just say, for argument's sake, you're sick and tired of Alstom, and really it's just a placeholder, nothing against Alstom at all. You're sick and tired of that one supplier. You say, okay, well, I terminate you. What does it mean? You've got a lot of sunk costs. You've got termination costs. You've got to rip out everything that has been done until that point in time. So 75% of your delivery needs to be ripped out. That's lost. The money is lost for that. And then the worst thing is you bring another supplier in, they start from scratch. So you have your delivery period that you need to plug at the end of your schedule, but you have already spent 75% of your intended delivery time. So now you add 100 to 75, you end up with a delivery period which is 75% longer than what you initially anticipated. So there is a lock-in. There is always a lock-in. Anybody saying, I want CBTC without any lock-in, sorry, wrong technology. Go back to your legacy signaling.
Frank, I mean, discussing this, I don't see the advantage of interchangeability. I don't see the advantage. I see more risk. You got 3 subsystem suppliers. So what is the advantage of it apart from, and also longevity? How can you swap out a subsystem? Is Mr. somebody else, another supplier, going to tweak their specs to meet those interface requirements?
Well, one is to really, I mean, I can give you an opinion, but if you really want to hear it from the horse's mouth, as they say, your customer in Tel Aviv needs to talk to RATP in Paris. On the operator to operator, eye to eye level. That's the way to get out the information firsthand. Why did you do this? What about this potential problem and that risk and so on? They will explain. They will explain. And what they will probably, if they're completely transparent, will explain to you is that there were a few horrible examples in Paris where a metro line was built with CBTC for a certain cost. Then there was a line extension which was relatively small compared to the initial length of the line. And the extension cost for CBTC was more than for the entire initial line. Oh, and I'm talking like 2 additional stations versus 12 or something like that. So Paris has a history of traumatic experiences like that with later extensions of CBTC. Now, what I would say was what I know today from all the lessons learned, you can avoid those problems for your metro when you start from scratch, which you're doing right now. You can avoid those problems, or you can at least minimize the risk. How? When you go through your tender process and you say, okay, well, I'm looking for a CBTC supplier for one line, let's say line 3, because that's the one you're responsible for. What you're aiming for are 3 contracts with that supplier. 1 for delivery. That's easy. That's what you need anyway. The second one is for long-term support. Maintenance support, technology support, midlife, technology updates, software updates, bug fixes, the whole shebang. Making sure that for the life of the asset, you have access to that supplier. Number 3, and this is really where the rubber hits the road. Number 3 is you want a framework for extensions. Your line is working. 5 years later, you want to increase capacity because your passenger demand goes up. I want 3 additional trains. They need to be fitted with CBTC, with the same CBTC you already have. And suddenly you may find that your fitment cost for a train goes up by a factor of 2 or 3 compared to the initial installation. Why is this? Because they can. The supplier can. Well, you can't go anywhere else.
Yeah, right.
And this is where something like interoperability comes in handy, where you say, well, if you try to screw me, I go somewhere else.
Indeed.
But for being able to do that, first of all, you need to have an interoperable solution. If you don't have that, you don't have the option. So when you're locked in with one supplier, you need to find a point in time where your negotiation leverage is the biggest. And that's before you sign the first contract. And that's where you negotiate the cost of later extensions. Line extensions, additional station, additional 2 stations, whatever, additional onboard equipment for additional trains that you want to procure in the future. So that means you need to have a long-term, or you need to aim for a long-term price certainty for your CBTC product. No supplier wants to give you that. That's the last thing on earth they want. But I think within reason, you can kind of force them into it. Yeah, you've heard certainly about price variation formulas and something like that. So there are things that will change over time. Foreign exchange rate is one obvious thing. Inflation rate is another obvious thing. There are price escalation formulas that you can use, you can agree on in a contract, where you say, okay, the inflation index is taken from the Tel Aviv newspaper, and in that it's published every Sunday. Something, I'm making this up now. So when it comes to the crunch, both the supplier and the client can pick up the same issue of the Tel Aviv newspaper. They will both look into it, and it won't happen that one says it's 0.25 and the other one says it's 7.3. This is not going to happen. They will both read the same number. They will put the number in the formula. There's no debate. There's no discussion. There's no discourse about that. Same with foreign exchange rate. You just say, well, whatever, the Royal Bank of Israel, which you don't have because you don't have a king or a queen. So, but whatever the bank is, there will be a defined index for foreign exchange rate. It could be a bank in Paris. It could be a bank in Frankfurt. It could be a bank in Israel, whatever. Just agree on something where both parties have the same source of information, and there's nothing to debate about. There's nothing to disagree about. Both people will read the same number. There's a formula where you can plug the number in, and then you come up with a price. And then there may be some minor variation, maybe a slightly increased margin that the supplier wants, but slightly increased means another, 5% and not another 300% or something like that. So it basically gives you as a client an improved certainty that you won't be bent over a barrel in 5 years or 10 years. It keeps the supplier more honest. At the same time, it doesn't expose the supplier unduly to any unacceptable risks for future price fixing, something like that. I think it should work. From a procurement perspective, it would be very innovative. But hey, you are a new organization anyway. So there's no baggage from the past where you said, I was never allowed to do procurement like this because of blah, 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 whatever the excuses are. But you could actually come up with something like this. But first, you need to know about it. You need to know that this is a potential problem down the line when you have supplier lock-in, and you will have supplier lock-in. There's no way around it, right? You will always have some kind of supplier lock-in for the contract scope that you awarded. And you will find it very hard to pull out of that later on, if not impossible. Well, nothing is impossible, but you just may find it too hard, too expensive, too time consuming, too whatever. So,
Good
yeah.
news. Thank you. That's wonderful.
That was free consulting, like 2 hours of free consulting.
Thank you.
Well, look, this is now for the benefits of yourself and the people you talk to, and also for the benefits of the listeners. I'm teaching the same thing in my CBTC trainings. So anybody who wants to hear about this gets to hear about this. But at the same time, I dare say that I'm probably the only one in the world who teaches something like that in a CBTC training. Because normally in a CBTC training, you explain the technical things like how does ATP work, what is moving block, how do you regulate train traffics with automatic train regulation, things like that. And yes, I cover all of those things, but I also look at those application things. So what's the supply strategy? We talked about that, and how do you set it up? What are potential procurement traps and how to avoid them? So things like this. And of course, you can ask questions. For example, I've got 2 lines in Tel Aviv. The idea is to have a single track connection in between for this and this purpose. How do you do that? Or what do you think about that? And the possible outcome could be, or the the choices that we looked at. So let's just reframe what the choices were. Realistic choices with this setup, 3 lines connected with something in between so that trains can theoretically go from one line to the other, which will have consequences down the line regarding depot fitment and stuff like that. We talked about that as well. So realistically, I see 2 options. Option 1 is 1 supplier for the entire network, which may have consequences regarding capacity, horsepower on the ground, ability to deliver 3 lines in parallel, and so on. Option 2 is going with the only interoperable CBTC solution in the world, let aside New York, which is the Chinese solution. So option 3 is invent something for yourself, and good luck with that.
No, thank you.
I'm not, I would not in a million years recommend this to anyone, because what it means in practice is you're repeating the New York experience. The approach in New York was really thought through. There were very smart people working on that. It looked fantastic in theory, but then reality hit, and
yeah. I've got to say, Frank, a colleague really did push that. Go away, design procurement specs or performance and functionality specs for interoperability. You are what? No. If the industry isn't going to do it, when I say industry, Western industry, now that's out of scope. don't want to open that can of worms.
And this is one other recommendation that I would give every client. I mean, I'm not claiming that I know everything about CBTC, even though I think I have thought a lot about the strategic aspects of CBTC over the years. I've done a lot of work in lessons learned. So I have case studies, what have worked over there and what didn't work over there and so on. But if you want, and your client seems to be perfectly suited for that, because they ask the questions. They ask questions to the people that are most likely to provide the answers for that. Ask the suppliers. Don't second guess what the supply industry can do, can't do, will do, won't do. Ask the suppliers. You can do that very formally with a request for information, or you have an expression of interest process where you basically give suppliers a carrot. You can get shortlisted if you respond properly and behave and answer our questions. And then you ask them. Yeah, we will say, well, this is what we have in mind, interoperable setup. To what extent can you, Mr. Alstom or Mrs. Siemens or whatever, contribute to this solution? What can you offer? And then just see, I'm not suggesting what the answers will be, because that may change over the years as well. An answer that I got in person 2014 may look completely different from what the answer is you may get in Tel Aviv in 2024, 10 years later.
Well, Frank, I've got to tell you, you've seen my CV. You know I've been around a bit, and I have worked for the usual suspects, and I have approached friends who are now senior in those positions. We're all getting older. They're not quite as old as me, but they're in very heavy positions, and they all said, "What? No, I don't think so." Somehow, no, seriously, there's an opportunity coming up. Innovation is a big thing here. Would you be interested? No. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, what one last nugget I want to give you in order to over deliver here on what I already gave you in terms of consultancy. When you and you probably will understand immediately where I'm coming from. When you are in a competitive tender situation, every supplier tries to give you a good impression, to put the best step forward, to not shoot ideas that you have down or so. So what I often have is the classic question, can you do XYZ? And the supplier will say at 99.9% yes. So that's what I would call a promotional yes, because they try to promote themselves as the best possible supplier for you. So they will answer yes just to avoid saying no, or that's not a good idea, because that would kind of discredit them against the other competitors, possibly. So And many clients make the mistake that they stop after the first question. They wanted to hear yes, they hear yes. Okay, next question. Thank you very much. Next question means next topic. What they should do instead is following up with the second question, which is, have you done it before?
And how much?
XYZ. Have you, well, how much that you will see when the pricing comes about. But first and foremost, you are in an exploratory stage where you try to elicit from the industry, is a certain additional feature or interoperability or whatever, is that realistic at all? Or is that something that no supplier can deliver against? So when you ask the 7 question, have you done that before? If they say no, it's an immediate red flag, because it means you are the guinea pig. You will be the first one. If you insist on that feature, you will be the first one getting it. You want to be the first one? Your decision. If they say yes, we've done it before, there needs to be a question number 3. Show me where. Let's not show me, it's not a question, but where have you done it before? Can you show me where you've done it before? If they now say no, they lied to you in question number 2.
Or embarrassed about it.
If they say yes, then they can point you where they've done it. And then you can do a reference check, and then you can travel there and look at it. And then you have evidence that what you require, the feature that you require, is a proven feature, a proven solution that you can then happily include in your tender specification, because you have the certainty that somebody else did the bleeding before you. Yeah. But I have seen so many clients stopping after question number 1, going to the next topic, and then later they get hurt. We like, oh, well, I didn't really expect that you really end up doing this. Now let's talk about the details. Yes, we can do it, but, and then the money topic comes in, and then it's a contract variation. And then we need to talk about intellectual property, and that's going to cost you all these kinds of things. Or it may even turn out that it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
Like,
too many open factors there for me, for my liking, I'll be honest.
yes. And you really need to look at the entire picture. And the entire picture is a metro network with 3 lines that can operate, right? In a finite period of time. So you, I think you said in the pre-chat that the time frame was chosen quite generous, which is always a good idea if you start from scratch. But there will be an end date. There will be an end date where you say, by that point in time, I want at least the first line being in operation. And then there's a date for the second line, and then there's a date for the third line.
Yeah, and as you know, these clients these days and organizations are driven by project managers who are hell-bent on adhering to schedules for saving face, for political reasons, everything else. For me, it's just too risky trying something very, very innovative on this scene.
Exactly. So anything, if you want to maximize the certainty of delivering on time and on budget, and of course also with a given quality, then you need to make sure that you minimize or eliminate all the risks that you could have on the cost and budget side in order to achieve a certain quality, which is a scope, including certain features that may be innovative or new or unproven, world first, bespoke, which to me is a swear word almost. Yeah. So you don't really, well, you should think twice before you do something like that. And for a metro, without any prior experience of metro delivery and metro technology application, you know what? If Singapore, who have done now, I think 6, 7, 8 lines, something like that, all fitted with CBTC, if they say for line number 9, we want to consider an additional feature, and we are in close contact with all our 3 accredited suppliers, and they all think they can make it happen, and we've known them for so long that they know they don't tell us bull dust or so. That may work.
Yeah.
But for an inexperienced metro organization that has no experience in operating a metro, no experience in installing a metro, rolling out a metro, dealing with suppliers for metro, risk minimization should be very, very high on the priority list. Let's just leave it there.
And the guy, I'm confident the guys are smart enough. I mean, this client's smart. They're impressive. That's why I'm here, because they enrolled me. They are smart. They ask all the right questions. It's refreshing. You know, there isn't arrogance here. There isn't. We know, we've been there, we've done it, we know best. It's, hey, you know, let's look at this. Let's really probe. So I'm very confident that the client is smart enough to take the advice and to figure it out for themselves. You know, I mean, really.
Yeah. But it's always good to ask multiple parties, and you can either do that in an exploratory phase where you have a variety of advisors, and then you see whether they all tell you the same thing, and it's probably true, or whether there are big contradictions in there, in which case you maybe need to dig a bit deeper to find out whether this person's right, that person's right. And arguably the cheapest way of getting there is by independent review.
Yeah, indeed.
That can be done very, very inexpensively. Having someone like me doing a peer review over 3 days, what's the cost for that? 3 man days. And if you have a confirmation of the stuff that you've already done, that's great. Then you get additional certainty at a very low price. If I come up with something that contradicts the stuff that you've previously done, and you drill deeper into that, and it finds out that the initial advice was maybe not quite as correct as you thought it would be, that advice would be priceless.
Absolutely.
For the cost of 3 man days. That's something where trying to save money at those ends, or when it's about buying an additional piece of yellow machinery or so, these so-called cost savings may turn out to be the most expensive ones that you've ever done.
Indeed.
And that's just a general warning. I mean, there are other things like reuse of legacy equipment, which in your case is not really relevant because you're greenfield, which is good. But very often when people think they can save money at the expense of software developments, like hardware savings at the expense of software developments, you always lose.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, no, I think there's enough experience around here to weigh up CapEx versus OpEx and things like this, you know, which is really good news. There are some good guys in our sister line, M2. It's a pleasure dealing with them. You know, there are a couple of old war horses there as well. Been there, done that. Got the arrows in the front and the back, you know.
Okay, good.
No, I really heard what you've said, Frank. I mean, superb. Thank you so much. And definitely heard about the peer review. I've undertaken that a couple of times in Abu Dhabi. 15 years ago, we brought in, who was it? Was it Hong Kong or was it Singapore? I think it was Hong Kong at the time, MTR. Yeah. And that was invaluable. Yeah, we like this, we like this, we like this. Oh, what about that? Yeah. In our experience, you know, a real life operator, one with a good reputation. Really? You're not too on that one? You know, okay.
Yeah. And the thing is they all do consultancies by now. I mean, MTR you just mentioned. SMRT has a consulting arm by now, so that's Singapore Metro, one of the operators in Singapore. RATP has definitely a consulting arm, the Paris Metro operator. So
value for money, not cheap.
Yes, exactly. That's what it is. Yeah. So somebody wants to say, well, thank you very much for your time. This has gone much longer than I thought. I would think it should have been very valuable for readers that are interested in the field of CBTC, new metros in general, because CBTC will inevitably be part of that. And hopefully, in the same way that you said that was interesting, that was helpful, that some of the listeners may find it interesting and helpful as well. And I mean, your experience, you've been around the block so much. We should probably just do a follow-up where you just tell us some war stories from your previous experiences or something like that.
Oh dear.
Without mentioning names, of course.
Oh dear. I try not to, but there's no malice. It's one instance I remember, SEAL 4, right? Nothing goes wrong with SEAL 4. It's a Rolls Royce, yada, yada, yada. Everything's wonderful. Bangkok MRTA, the line I love, the first rollout line in Bangkok. I was with Siemens. I was responsible for signaling, on-site signaling. I'm in the train, the first run train. Hey, this is exciting, right? The first train run, GOA2, we're there. PB was the engineer, or whatever they called themselves back then, the client rep. I'm there with a couple of Siggy guys as well. You know, everybody's happy. It's the first train run. There are Thai guys there from, I think it was called MRTA even back then. We're on the train. We go down the depot. We pull into the station, first station, second station. Oh, this is fantastic. You know, this is beautiful rollout by Siemens. Siemens done a damn good job against all the odds. We come to this station, Frank. Doors open. Wrong side. PB guys turn around to me. Charles Harrison turned around to me, PB guy, and he's still around with WSP in Bangkok. What the hell's this, Bill? Don't know.
And it may just turn out to be a single software bit in the design for that specific station or so.
Frank, it was even more basic than that. The original station was designed as what do you call them? Sorry, since COVID, my memory's shot. Where you have a platform on either side of the track. You have two running rails and a platform there, as opposed to an island platform. However, they changed the design to be an island platform. So the train rolls in, opens the doors on the left-hand side or whatever it was. What happened to version control? You know, SEAL 4 is wonderful, but it's the oversight of it. It's the application of it. It's the basics. Watching it. That was the first one. Second one, culture. You've got to love culture wherever you go. Malcolm Pert, an old friend of mine, ex-British Gurkha officer, huge guy, big guy, loves his job, passionate about his job, came out from the client PD's office fuming. Whatever the argument was, he's fuming. Dedicated freight corridor, way back when. Comes out, hits the bell on his desk, ding, and the boy comes running out. Yes, sir, Malcolm says, please go out, get me 20 Marlboro Reds, and if they ain't got Marlboro Reds, anything to do. So the kid, yes, sir, runs out. So 20 minutes later, Malcolm's still belly aching about his argument with the client PD. He's steaming. Where's my fags? Fags is a British term for cigarettes. No, kid, we're in Delhi. You know, where's he gone? 25 minutes. Where's my fags? I need my cigarettes. Kid comes running in. Honestly, as true as I'm sitting here, bag of oranges on Malcolm's desk. Oomph. Malcolm looks at the oranges, looks at me. I look at the kid, look at the oranges. What's that? Oranges, sir. Yeah, I know they're oranges. Where's my fags? Oranges, sir. I can see they're oranges. Where's my cigarettes? No Marlboro Red, sir. Oranges, sir. And I just burst myself into laughter. Malcolm, you said if you haven't got Marlboro Reds, anything you do, 20 oranges. I mean, that's a challenge. You know, one of the challenges of working in a different environment, a different culture, literal translations. You know, literal translation.
Yeah.
What did I do wrong? You said anything. But it's so amusing working in different cultures. You know, like Southeast Asia, not losing face. You can't challenge people. You know, help me understand. You know, help me understand how you got there. So sorry, old war stories, but I love them. I love them. It's great. It really is.
Excellent. Bill, thank you for your time.
Well, again, thanks for the invitation, and it's been great chatting to you. I loved it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye now.
Bye.
Hi, this is Doc Frank again. Before you head off, I just wanted to let you know again of the arguably best CBTC conference that has ever been held, the CBTC World Summit 2023, with 18 speakers from 13 different countries. It was a mega event in September this year, and you now have access to the official recording where you can see all the presentations, all the question and answers after the presentations, and even the VIP fireside chats that were exclusively for VIP attendees during the conference. But you can have all of this now lifelong on demand. You can watch it whenever you want, from wherever you want, and how often you want. Don't miss this opportunity and sign up to the best CBTC conference ever on docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC World Summit 2023. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC World Summit 2023. If you want one recommendation from me on CBTC, that is it. The best content of the year by a mile. Don't miss it. Hi, it's Doc Frank again. I hope you liked today's episode. I like to keep it as simple as possible, so I only have one single request for you. If you like this podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues about it. That's all I want, because that's a service that I'm providing to the industry, and I would like as many people as possible to listen to this podcast and learn something from it. So please share, and until next time, keep it simple and bye for now. Thank you for listening.